call the March 14th, 2022 Ware, New Hampshire Board of Firewards meeting to order at 6:04 PM. First item on the agenda is correspondence. Actually, before we get started, we do have a new board seated. I didn't put our organizational time, that's election of chairman, vice chairman, secretary, on the agenda because I had heard that it was a good chance that people might not be able to get sworn in time. We do have everybody here. If you want to do that today, we can. Or we can wait till next month if you'd prefer.
Why don't we get it done?
Okay? Anybody have anything other than that? Okay. We'll go forward. Why don't we do that now then before we start with the regular business? So we have up for chairperson, vice chairperson, and Chief Spen, the secretary, if he's willing to keep doing it. We don't have to hire somebody. All right, why don't we start with chairperson?
I nominate Steve Roberts as chairman, chairperson.
Okay. Is there any other nominations? Actually, we need a second, right, on that?
I'll second it.
Okay. Is there any other nominations? Is there any other nominations?
You're not going to get
Okay.
out of it.
All right.
I think we're,
Since there's only one, then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? All right. Next is the vice chair.
I just asked a question.
Sure.
Second it.
I assume that everyone said yes.
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 Okay.
Who's the vice chair now?
Scott was.
Oh, Scott was?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Is there any nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Wayne Meady.
Second.
Sure.
It's been motioned and second. Is there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Hearing none, then all in favor of Wayne Meady as vice chair,
Aye.
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Being none, the motion carries.
I think so.
No, Killian did.
Are you willing to do the minutes for us, Chief, or Secretary?
Sure.
Okay. Then I make a motion for Chief Azina for Secretary.
I'll second that.
Motion seconded. Is there any other nominations? Any other nominations? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Thank you, Chief. And I should have introduced our two new members first. We have Louisa Erf, who was elected as a fire department member to the board. Our board is made up of 7 members. 3 are elected from the town that are not members of the fire department. 3 are elected as members of the fire department, and then the fire chief also sits on the board, so that gives us 7 members. And then Killian Donnelly is from the public, a non-member, and he joins us as well. Welcome aboard. All right, we will go ahead with the regular meeting. So correspondence.
None.
We have none. New business.
The only new business I have, whether you want to discuss it now or later,
It's up to you.
is the weight scale.
Oh, I have pay scale discussion after new business. But if that's all we have for
Well, I
new
just had it
business.
under new business.
Okay.
You want to do it now, or you
Sure.
want to do it?
Apparently, I need help staying on point. Unless-
I think,
Do you want us to come back to it?
no,
Okay.
I brought my highlighter for you guys. So I think we discussed wage scale at some point in the past. Right? I don't remember. Oh, I know we did, right?
Yep.
And so what we could see happening was, without any real compensation plan, is we were getting people kind of all jumbled up, if you will. And there was also whether we were being competitive, and also whether or not that we could look, that someone could look at their future, right, and see some sort of progression potentially, or what have you. There was really nothing other than what we had come into hiring full-time people and saying, these are really the three pay rates for the three major qualifications, and even that's changed considerably since we started this endeavor. So what I did, and we got a little bit of help from some other area fire chiefs, is that there was a survey that was put out of what do communities pay their firefighter advanced EMTs. And so they got a bunch of results back, and those results are listed on the bottom. And it only pertains to the, I'll call it the labor grade of the firefighter AEMT. And that's what's highlighted on your page. And I had kind of had in the back of my mind what felt like, where we would be on that particular range. And what we found when we started to put some of that to paper was that what was being offered out there, what our market was, what our competition is, if you will, that we were in the ballpark. And so the survey data, which is at the bottom of this page, really kind of validated what I thought was kind of deserving in that particular classification. And so when I say we, I'm mostly talking about me, but also sitting down with Beth in finance, is kind of building this scale off of that line that's highlighted, both up and down. So both up as medic and down as a EMT. And then that line that's highlighted is in the retirement system of Group 2, right? So those are firefighter EMS providers. And then in the next matrix that's down is Group 1 employees, which are the non-firefighter required personnel. So those are two different retirement groups. And there's a fair amount of overlap, but, some of the discussion is what is the value of that firefighter cert versus non-firefighter cert? We had that discussion, that's roughly, about a year ago or so, when we looked at job description changes. And so that, even though there's a fair amount of overlap between the two scales, they don't start at the same place, and the Group 1 scale lags behind the Group 2 scale by the value of that, right? It's off by really a step, if you will. Even though our employees are, and this is where you kind of get a little bit of, try to visualize what it means, even though our employees are hourly employees, and so everything's based on an hourly rate, it isn't until you look at the annualized amount between a Group 1 employee and a Group 2 employee that you, right, so we tried to show some parity between the two, but because the way they actually get paid, Group 2 people are average, their work week is averaged over 4 weeks, where the Group 1 people are paid actual hours worked. So you have to look at the annual amount to compare apples to apples, if you will, the compensation between one group and another. That makes total sense in my mind, but that may not come out of my mouth in a way that makes sense.
Okay, so, just clarifying.
Yep.
So the Group 2 people, they take an average of the hours that they work over 4 weeks, and that's what they get paid for.
Correct.
Okay.
And that average is 42 hours a week. The second, well, the one below that, the Group 1 people, is they get paid actual hours worked.
Okay.
Even though they work the same number of hours over the course of those 4 weeks, Fair Labor Standard says for a 40-hour person, a non-firefighter person, you can't average their hours. They have to be paid the actual hours. So 3 of the weeks are getting paid 40 hours plus 8 hours of overtime because they work 48 hours in that week. And then they have 1 week where they work 24 hours in that 7-day period. And so they only get paid the 24 hours in that period. So a little confusing.
Very.
I understand that. Some of it is because that's what's based in federal law. And, based on the classification of the people that we have. So we have some in both. So going back to the data that we got back on the survey, is it really kind of, the data that we got back is for a firefighter / advanced EMT. That's what's highlighted on the scale. And so we built a scale that is in harmony, I guess, with the average that's out there in this market that we get returns on.
So that's what these are from the other towns.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
The two scales are related to each other. And have all the inherent issues that are unique to Group 2 and are unique to Group 1. We tried to make the steps, if you will, that I could point to in the upper chart, right? Let's just take the upper chart in step 2, which says $22 an hour is $48,049. If you go down to step 1 of the row that's labeled A for advanced EMT, that, let me make sure I'm talking about the right one. I'm sorry, it's not step 1, it's step 3. That number is nearly identical. It's off a little bit because of rounding, but it's very similar in annualized amount, even though the pay rates are vastly different because we're compensating them the way we have to pay them on a weekly basis. So, and just to reiterate, so a firefighter AEMT that's at step 2 is roughly making the same amount of money as an advanced EMT at step 3. So there is some parity amongst the scales. It just takes an extra step, I guess, to get to the same rate. Or the same annualized amount.
Do you know, in comparison with other towns, you have 10 steps on here.
Yep.
I'm familiar with 5 to 7 years. I haven't seen it that went out 10 years, but I didn't know if you.
Yeah, so my experience has been more than 5 or 7 steps.
Okay.
There's some places that, Nashua at one point, and may still be that way, was 4 or 5 steps. If you kind of learned all you're gonna learn, maybe in 4 or 5 years, and so you're kind of at the maximum. The methodology of where I used to work was, no, they just stretched that out over time. All of the steps are, there's 3% in between each step, and from labor grade, so from EMT to advanced EMT to medic, there's 10% in between each of those labor grades, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's a typo. Don't hate that. There's many different, I want to say in the Concord one, if you look at their scale, it goes out to 34, 57. But it takes many more years than 10 to get there. It's a long ways out. But so one of the issues that we saw is when you look around is that the bottom of the scale had fallen way behind, even in the 3 years that we've been doing this, had fallen way behind market. And we heard this when a couple of our employees went to Hopkinton. We know with dairy, and I wouldn't necessarily let dairy is really in our market because they pay much more than most people do, but it was a $5 difference between, here and there. And so as you're trying to attract candidates, if you're advertising that
I passed it along, but
if you're advertising that your starting pay is $18 an hour, you're not really getting serious inquiries from a lot of people. So we knew we had to bring the bottom up. The mid-range was probably okay, but the bottom was definitely needed to be addressed.
Now, what about, so this is a straight 3% between steps. What about, have you looked at, I know some places will give steps and there's requirements to have certifications to get to that step. And then some places have incentives for being certified. I know, I don't know if they do it now, but years ago, Nashua was one of them where pretty much you got a lot of, you could, once you were off probation, you went right to your education level of pay.
Yep. We saw a bunch of information where there were some sort of incentives for all different things. Some communities didn't give a lot of money, but they gave, if you had your water rescue certification, that was worth $100. If you were like a fire officer too, that was worth, $150. If you were an inspector certified, that maybe was worth some money. There's really no end to doing something like that, though the potential of doing something like that. I think that as a workforce, as it starts to mature, or get some tenure, is like, how do we use, those employees to do the things that we need to do, whether that's inspections, whether that's, public education or what have you. And incentive pay, I mean, we have it built into the labor grades, but, I think incentive pay is a good way to encourage people to, improve on their skills.
So I guess if we started with something like this, then we could add things as we grew, and is that,
Oh, I would agree with that. Yeah.
okay?
Yeah. And really what this was an attempt to formalize what does our pay structure look like? Because we can see it already as we have, someone coming in the door. It's like, well, where do we put them? And what is that doing with other people that are already here? And so we saw, trying to shoehorn people into a pay rate that was, one, fair to them, but also fair to the existing employees. And so we have some issues that we probably should look to address. Rather than just arbitrarily saying, you get this much, and then you get this much.
Now, so between steps would be yearly?
We didn't even gone that far.
Okay.
It was really like, let's get something on paper that had some validity to it, based on what's going on out in the world. And then we can maybe come back as a group and say, all right, well, how do we want, now that we have people on here, what do we want to do with that? Do we want to say, hey, you know what, it's progressive? Do we want to have like an annual evaluation to get from one step to the other? Do we want to, what do we want to do with that at that point?
And our probation is how long?
Right now, it's 6 months by town policy. We found that that's probably not long enough. Especially with someone from the outside, for sure. That, there's a lot, that if someone struggles, right, 6 months is not long enough. If they come in and they're awesome, then 6 months is plenty. But if they come in and it's like, ooh, this person's not quite as far along as we thought they were, or they, whatever, 6 months is not a very long look.
Do they have like a hard list of requirements that they have to do to pass probation?
Yeah, we have a probationary employee manual that covers everything from how the door code works to whatever they need to know to get checked off on the ambulance to whatever. And some of that came from, again, some of our employees are kind of homegrown. Some of our employees are not. And so when someone came in from the outside that doesn't really know anything about this community, is how do we make sure that they understand what it is they're supposed to know, right? So that's the purpose of that book. And then you can kind of track it and see who's checking the boxes as they go along, or who should have checked this box already and hasn't, right? That we can go back and say, well, why isn't it done? And let's say it's streets, right? It's like they just don't know their streets. And so you can kind of focus in on that. It works for them because they understand what it is they're supposed to know. Works for us because we can track what it is that they've accomplished.
Well, one of the things that, in trying to, attract good people too, I know that some departments most departments that I know of are doing about a year probation for new hires. But some of them will do 6 months for a lateral transfer, or if it's like from the call department, with experience, to kind of, you know, entice people to come, plus that already have a fair amount of training and experience.
I
With the
think 9
important
months
part
is
of-
probably, 9 months would be adequate,
Okay.
I think.
So the other piece of that is to say, okay, when you complete your probation, you go to step 2.
And
It's-
we more or less do that.
Okay,
So they come in at a rate, and then what we had done, not with all of them, but what we've done with most of them is they get a 3% at the end of probation.
Clear fire alarm time check at 18:30 hours, 7 PM, U 823 clear.
6:30, everyone.
This wasn't necessarily intended to be a comprehensive compensation plan with all the nuts and bolts done. It was really, this is the scale that we're looking at. Because I recognize there's a lot of other steps, a lot of other pieces to that. All right, how do they move from one step to the other? How, you know, what are we gonna require? Again, that evaluation piece, whether that wants to be a part of that, I think that there's value to that. That it isn't just a blind longevity kind of scale.
anybody have any questions or comments?
It looks fair to me, but I don't work in, so I'd like to hear some employees' input, I guess.
I'd like a 30% raise, but, we've talked about this quite a bit. We have to start somewhere, and it looks fair to me. I don't have a problem with it.
One of the things, having spent a fair amount of time, is especially if you're going to a department, is to see where you're gonna be in the future. And that, you know, that people will sometimes, you know, take a cut in pay, knowing that in a year, 2, 3, 4, 5, they'll be up to where they were, especially coming from someplace else. So I think it helps to attract folks. I think it's important to also have a, you know, like the evaluations, so it's not just, you know, for surviving, but we want people that want to learn as they go and excel.
So are we looking for a motion to put this into reality?
Are you ready to do
Yeah,
that, or
I-
do you want to know how the progression of the steps is going to be before we actually? I mean, this is a great starting point, but didn't you say you wanted to actually, like, have it laid out how you were going to move from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, as opposed to just being.
So,
manual?
yeah, so we're at a point now where we have, right, our position of the, not counting the 2 new positions, but the positions that we have filled, that we could implement the scale, we could move people onto the scale, and then that would kind of give us a year, more or less, to work out some of those details until, well, it gives us a year before we need to figure out what's the mechanism of how people progress from one step to the other.
So you're still looking at the step increase as sort of an annual thing, not not based on training or additional certifications or what have you. It'd still be sort of an annual thing, what'd you do over the year, and if included whatever requirements or
Yep, and that could be all part of that evaluation process. But it also, so let's take, let's say Smith comes in and they get hired as a basic, and then they get their advanced EMT. It's like, where do they go from there? We've kind of had when we were all on the call force, we had a plan, wouldn't necessarily call it a scale, but we had a plan where based on your level of certification, which let's say there was 12 different combinations, is you would get a pay rate. It was relatively straightforward because like every incremental step up was worth, let's say, $1 an hour. And so if someone they came in the door, they were, let's say they had no certification and they got their firefighter certification, that added $1 to their hourly rate. Their EMT added $1 as they progressed up wherever they went. But if they didn't gain any new skill, then they were at the mercy, if you will, of what the COLA was going to be at town meeting. Not that there was necessarily anything wrong with that, other than once you if you came in the door, you really were going to have the same pay rate for the whole time you were here, unless you got a COLA or you added skill set. And so if like Wayne comes in and gets hired, it's like, well, under the current plan is I have nothing to show him. That you will not get a pay raise here, regardless of how good you are, right? There's no progression. And so that may be fine for some period of time, but if you're a real go-getter, if you will, is you're probably not going to stay. You're going to go, someone else is going to pick you up, or you'll get recruited by someone, or poached, as they say. And that happened to us. It happens all the time.
yeah.
So this is, like I said, I don't think, it certainly isn't complete. The scale part that's the easy part, that's just math. It's the mechanisms that I think we have time, if we implemented this today, we have time to figure some of that stuff out until the next, like that annual trigger, if you will.
Thank you. I guess that goes back to your question.
Okay. Is there any other questions or discussion?
I would move we push forward with this.
I'll second.
Want to make that into an official motion?
Thought I just did.
Okay.
I move we accept this pay scale as presented. We will take the time that is required to devise a mechanism to implement it.
That's a great motion.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion, and it is second. Is there any further discussion or questions?
Can you just kind of reiterate that?
I move to implement this pay scale as presented and take whatever time we need to figure out the mechanism.
That's some big words.
Mechanism of progression.
Yes, that'll work.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Actually, this is, I believe this is something that members of the department should abstain from.
Oops, I abstain.
Okay, I didn't hear any
Someone
abstains.
else needs to make the motion then. Do you keep
You're
your
right.
motion?
Sure, but I'm not gonna word it that elegantly, I will say.
I didn't think of
What is
that.
it?
I'm sorry, I didn't think of that at the time, but you're correct.
Can't vote on my own pay?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much, you pay that affects you and like promotion, et cetera, that affects you as well is kind of the triggers. I apologize for not thinking of that
understand that.
before. Okay, so,
Did it do over?
Killian, you want to make the motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to accept this.
As presented.
I'll second.
Perfect. I didn't do it as elegant.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
motion's been made and seconded. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
I'll abstain.
I'll abstain.
Okay.
Dave as well, or?
All set with it?
Do you, do you get,
Huh?
you're on the department,
Yeah,
you get paid?
yeah, if I did
Then
something.
you should probably abstain.
Okay,
Right, I'll
I just abstained you.
Whatever.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
All right. So that, then there's 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor and 3 abstains, correct?
yeah.
Yeah, because this doesn't,
Does affect
this
him.
doesn't affect you, correct?
No.
Okay. All right, I apologize for that
Nope.
confusion.
It's okay.
Just going along here, not, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute.
Maybe we should reconsider that chair motion.
All right, moving on to approval of minutes. We have both January and February. We should probably take up January 1st. At the last meeting, I skipped over to move to the presentations that we did later in the meeting, and I skipped that too, apparently. So we have January 10th, 2022 in front of us. The only thing that I would like to point out is that under call to order B, it does not member vice chairman under Scott Dinsmore, so I thought that should be added.
Should what?
To add that Scott Dinsmore as vice chair.
That's his
Do you have
title.
a copy of
That,
January?
that is his title, so. Oh,
Yeah, I got
you didn't get that?
February.
Yeah, you can look at this, how's that?
Well, you're not gonna like February then.
In February?
Okay.
Okay, so we're on January, has everybody had a chance to read them?
I would move to accept the January 10 minutes as corrected.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second, is there any other questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
I'm abstaining because I wasn't there.
Okay. So the motion carries. Then we have February 14th.
How many abstaining people did we have in the last one?
Just one that I
Just me.
heard.
Oh,
One?
2.
Yeah.
No, you're right, one, sorry, my bad.
You ready to move on? Don't want to overwhelm you, chief, that's. Trying to keep up. All right, so we have the
Say
February,
vice chair on that one.
we have the February 14th, 2022 there. Does everybody have one?
Sure.
Okay.
I move to accept the February 14th minutes as printed.
I will second that.
Okay, the motion's made and seconded. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain.
Abstaining.
I'm abstaining.
Okay, we have 2 abstain. Thank you. Okay, then we have the manifest. I just got a question on the manifest since we're here. There's a heating, looks like a heating thing.
Yep.
Is that for one of the stations?
Yep, that is in East Ware.
Okay.
So the oil burner went kaput back in, I don't know when, December. We chose to switch to propane and put a new heater in.
So that doesn't come out of town buildings?
So that did come out of town building fund.
So
So
that's,
that could have been approved by us or by them.
okay, so, but it's not coming out of our budget?
No. It's coming out of the government building
That's all I
fund.
needed to know.
I have a question too, actually, on the dispatch. Now, when we are joining the capital area.
Yep.
That'll go away, that dispatch? Do we join there, we get dispatched through them?
Correct. Yep.
When does that start?
I have-
actually?
I'll cover that in the chief's report.
You can go.
No, that was, never mind, go for it. Go ahead.
I don't know. I'm new to this. Why do we have something from the police department in there? Is it like the maintenance from Dodge or whatever? I just don't know.
Oh, so, at Hillsborough Ford,
Yeah.
we have one account, and it says police department on it for the town of Ware. So every time we get, we get an oil filter for the ambulance, it
It-
comes from Ford,
Oh,
it just happens to show up with their name on it.
Oh.
They will chart it over and say, this is yours.
Okay. I was just wondering. I saw that and I was like, oh,
For whatever reason, they won't do multiple.
all right.
Okay, is there any other questions or discussions on the manifest? All right, I'll make a motion to accept the Ware Fire Department's accounts payable manifest for checks dated 3/17/2022 in the amount of $12,996.41.
Second.
Have a second? Is there any further questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. The motion carries. Then we have administrative report.
So the administrative report, I really haven't done a whole lot since the beginning of the year because I've been waiting for the town vote, which finally happened. The revenue that we brought in for the first 2 months is about $26,865. That's gross revenue. The balance after they made transfers into the vehicle and equipment replacement fund, the balance is just over 700,000. Of which we have the ambulance that was approved by the voters, so about half of that will come out when we get around to buying the ambulance. Out of the operating budget, they made all of the changes to the operating budget that needed to be made because of the full-time firefighter warrant article. The operating budget that we received was the default budget, which it was the same amount of money as our proposed budget. Again, this year, we've spent $153,748 of that. So far, we have sent out a specification to ambulance vendors to get pricing back from, I forget how many there are, I think there's like 6 of them. They have until April 1st to send their returns in, and from there, we'll get into the trying to decide what is the best, best package. We notified Capital Area Mutual Aid Fire Compact that we were successful at the town vote. They are gonna send us out, like a workbook, if you will, that will cover everything from run cards to, cross streets to commonplace names, et cetera, to take all that information, put it into their CAD system, what our radio identifiers are for the different vehicles and things like that. So it's a really kind of soup to nuts process, with a September 1st start date is the target. So as Leah asked, once we move to capital in September, is we should see, we're gonna get a prorated bill from Capital Area Mutual Aid Compact for a quarter of the year. We'll stop making payments to Goffstown Dispatch. We will no longer be in that, the major portion of the maintenance contract with R&R Communications. It's another one or two little miscellaneous payments as well, until the next year's budget, and then that whole year will be in capital in '23's budget. And we're beginning the process of identifying potential employees for the next two slots, which are kind of scheduled for July 1st-ish start at this point. We have one that I think we feel pretty confident about. And at the moment, we don't have any idea of the second one, but we really just started. Tanker's broken. The fire pump that's on the tanker, issue upon further evaluation of that, is gonna require a substantial amount of money, about $6,000, $6,500 to fix it is the rough estimate at the moment. The newer of the two ambulances had an issue with the brakes today, which seems to be like an issue from the brakes from last week. So that's really more like a wear and tear item.
So is that
Hoping for
out of
spring.
service now?
At least
So
until
you're
tomorrow.
running the old one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Has there been any thought on, are we busy enough? Do we need a spare? I guess is what I'm asking.
Like a spare, like
Well,
three of them?
Yeah,
I don't think so.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Most of the stuff is typically fixed within a week. Most of the issues that we've seen with the ambulance, the newer one, has really been stuff that wears out. So brakes,
Tires.
yeah, brakes, tires, alignment, stuff that can more or less be scheduled, if you will. Oil change, right, it goes down, it's there for, it all depends on what other stuff is kind of lingering, but, that's less than a day. So I would say typically not. It's when you have something, I think this is not gonna, I think worst comes to worst, this is a whole brake job, but that's just a couple days and you're back out there.
Okay.
But I don't even think it's that much, this particular case. Ambulance 2 was down 2 months this summer with a broken rear end in it.
that was the 4,500, right?
Yeah, the
We
one
still got that.
designated to
Okay.
be replaced.
Yeah, they don't make those anymore.
Don't make them anymore. As you probably heard with the DPW director, parts are really hard to come
Yeah.
by. We were fortunate we got a part for ours. But you don't know, right? Nowadays, you buy something and it's
Yeah.
just plagued by
Yep, no, that's,
issues.
well, I think going with a pick for repair, I think going with a pickup style body, you know, with especially the hood, because the vans just have too much temperature under the hood. They burn everything up under there.
I don't even know if they make vans anymore.
Yeah, I think they're pretty well gone away
Yeah.
from them.
It's too bad that the GMC, they don't make them anymore. It's, because from an access issue, right? The engine is completely
Well, that
exposed when you
tilt
pull the
top was
hood
beautiful.
off that.
Yeah,
The cab is a nice size. You're up a little bit higher off the ground. It just has certainly not the best truck that we've ever operated here. I mean, it's too bad, but it seems more like a weight distribution issue amongst other stuff, but, I mean, that's a '09, I think.
Yeah.
We've already replaced the brake lines in that truck, right? That it just rotted off. So, you don't know. I think right, from a Ford
yeah, but
perspective,
it's 13 years old now.
they replaced those 6 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because when did, it took us a while, was it that one or the last one? Wasn't it a year or two to get the funding for, was it the last one or the one before that one?
I think the concept of you want something that will hold up to whatever your duty level is, and we don't have severe duty. That's I think it needs to be four-wheel drive. That seems to have worked well for us in the last couple of years, and it needs to be inexpensive enough so that you can replace it on a regular basis, so that you're not trying to run something that you should have got rid of 2 years ago, and that breaks all the time. By the time we got rid of that old ambulance with this one, the Ford, that thing was in terrible shape.
Yeah, that was awful.
And so unfortunately, they're expensive. And so, you want to hang on to it to get, for as long as you can, but at some point, it's like, you just need to move on, because it's the ability to repair them is limited in the town of Ware, well, in the DPW realm. And so we can't afford to have a vehicle out of service for 2 weeks, or it doesn't work well for us, because we only have one other truck, one other spare. So, those are, you put them all on the balance beam and you try to figure out what's the best course of action. But I think not keeping them forever, right, is
Yeah, how
just moving along.
about back-to-back calls? Where one's out of service for a call? and we
Yeah,
get a
so
second.
one thing that I'm not able to pull out of so we switched over to a new fire incident reporting system that the state provides. And that's some data that has been much harder to pull out. Is, what is the occurrence of overlapping incidents? I would say generally it seems less now than it used to be for overlapping medicals. But, we've been very fortunate that during the daytime anyways, is that the full-time staff, the majority of them live local, and so you're able to get them back to work. So that's helped out tremendously. We still have some members of the call force that are pretty active, that help out.
Well, I was thinking about the vehicle part of it for right now. You know, having the two. So now if one's out of service for mechanical, now you have to go right to
Well,
mutual
we may
aid.
not be able to transport,
Yeah,
but we're still able to get out there
Yeah.
and provide
okay.
medical care, which is, you know, while you're waiting for whoever that is to come in. It certainly,
Yeah,
it certainly happens,
yeah.
for sure.
Okay.
I want to say last week, that snowstorm, we had another call right after we transported someone to the hospital. We had a cardiac arrest and another medical, but we didn't have staff. We had another ambulance, we didn't have staff. So it's, everyone's doing mutual aid. Goffstown runs out of ambulances often. New Boston, surprisingly, I think, has seemingly a lot of concurrent calls for a small community. Some of that's if you pick someone up and they decide we're gonna go to the Elliott,
Right,
right, that has now made what was maybe a hour-long round trip, say to Concord, is now, you're pushing 2 hours. Especially if you're going with traffic at rush hour in the morning, right? It takes forever. And that's, I think, more of a factor than, you know, you're just stacking calls up.
okay.
You know, we're designed to handle a call every 2 hours. If we have them more often than that, then we'll run into a problem.
Well, if this, at some point, we probably want to think about the possibility, you know, seeing how, if calls keep going up, which they're probably going to, communities growing. And maybe not this one, but the next one's gonna be, what, 5 to 7 years? See if it's,
Ambulance?
yeah, prudent to keep the older one.
Yeah,
You know,
well, I
at
think
some
that there's a discussion to be had there, is do you potentially replace them maybe a little bit sooner in order to create
A decent,
a decent spare,
Spare,
I guess, yeah.
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 Well, if not this time, maybe next time. If, you know, if the,
Yeah, I don't know that the GMC is the one to do that with.
okay,
You know, the Ford that we have now has worked out pretty well. The upside of that truck is, you know, the suspension is really nice from a ride with a patient perspective. So, you know, the Ford's a much better candidate if you're gonna look at doing something like that. But, you know, here it is, that was a 15, I think, 2015.
before it is,
So
Wow.
this is
7 years, maybe 8 before we get the
Well,
new
let's
one.
say it's 6 full years.
Yeah, probably gonna be 7
and
before we
it's
get it.
90-something thousand miles.
Already. So, yeah, I think
Yep.
I would
It
think,
has as much mileage as the other truck.
yeah,
that we're
we
replacing.
may want to think about that then at the next one, because it has a way of hitting you in the face, in my experience.
I'd like
in
to see
fleet.
some sort of a paradigm shift in the ambulance manufacturing that lowers the price of them so that you can
Shorten up
that
the service life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you're pulling it out of frontline service, I mean, which fine, it's got, let's say it has 90,000 miles on it, and then you're gonna use it as a spare or your second due ambulance for a few years. You're still looking at a vehicle that's got 100.
Yeah, well, that's a concern too, because if, as the mileage escalates, then, you're running into the risk of it being out of service for mechanical more often. And it has a habit of catching up with you, so it doesn't cost us a lot in the big scheme of things to keep one for, I'm not saying not, I agree that we may want to look at moving up to replacement, because if your newest ambulance has 90,000 miles now, then that's getting up there of works. Okay, so at another, even 4 years, that's gonna be another 60,000. That's really getting up there.
Yeah, and in this particular configuration is that our second due ambulance wasn't overly dependable, or you were definitely, seemed like you were taking a step backwards by going into that truck. So
Especially in
I
the
think,
wintertime.
I don't think there's gonna be a huge difference between what's now the Ford ambulance and the new one, right? I think they're gonna be much more similar in all the good attributes. Except for one, which will be the loading system, right? So the one we're getting is the one they're gonna run, because it's gonna have that stretcher loading system in it.
That's all included in the price, okay.
Yeah.
And that's different from the cots that we have now, right?
Same cot,
Okay,
it's just a mechanism that allows you to basically slide it onto a rail that extends out the back, and so you can lift up the wheels and just push it in, versus holding onto the cot while you pick the wheels up. Right, so it kind of eliminates the human from holding the end of the cot with a 300-pound person on it.
come a long ways.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Is there a winch in there too?
We used to put them.
Does that come with a winch?
Doesn't come with a winch, but by being
have
a
one
member of
available.
Capillary Mutual
Yeah.
Aid, is you can get their bariatric
Yeah,
ambulance.
yeah, winch
Oh,
and
nice.
ramps. And they're, what, 1,000 pound on the cot, I think it is?
It's a lot,
Yeah.
yeah. We've been very fortunate as not to have someone with a long-term injury from patient handling. We've had a couple, strains and sprains, but nothing permanent.
Well, the fold-up step was probably the biggest advancement. That was,
Just the cot that lifts
oh,
the patient
because
up to
we
waist
used
height
to have
is
to
nice.
go down with it, then lift it up,
Right,
and then go like this over the step, and, yeah,
right.
it's tough.
We thought the fold-up step was
Well,
like
yeah.
incredible.
It was,
Yeah.
it was.
There's still, that part of the job that is physical, right? You can engineer out a lot, but there's still, it still requires, a human to be involved in that.
Mostly getting them out of their home.
Especially the bathroom,
Yeah,
where
you
it
still have to
seems
get 'em
like
out of their
people end
house,
up,
right?
end up there a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Need to develop some kind of belt with a winch on it. Lift people up.
Sometimes it's just no
I
place
don't wanna go down the stairs with them.
Yeah, sometimes it's just no place to work from, really. you know.
And you get the snow and the ice, I'm much happier
Yeah.
once it melts away.
Yep, absolutely.
This winter was icy. Oh, that's it on that.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
All right. Does anybody else have anything that we need to discuss tonight? All right, we have public, non-public, do we need anything on that?
No, I just didn't
Okay.
know with the weight scale discussion if it would require us to
Okay,
talk about specific individuals, but
unless somebody has something, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion's made, do we have a second? Seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.